So this week at lunchtimes and in the evenings, we are looking at some of the big values or issues or questions in our culture, and we're going to have a think about them, we're going to evaluate them a little bit and see what the Christian faith has to say about them, and you can see what you make of it. So today we are looking at freedom. Often one of the things which students love the most about leaving home and coming to uni is the increased freedom that you get. Freedom from your parents and the watchful eye and their opinions and their rules about things. Freedom to just spend your time how you like. Freedom to spend your money as you choose. You can eat what you like. You get so much freedom when you get to uni, and we love it because we love freedom. We want to be free. Freedom is one of, if not the biggest value which underpins our culture today, in Western society especially. The other talks I'll be doing at lunchtime, freedom is the bedrock of them. It feeds into all of it. And to sort of sum up what our culture or Western society thinks of freedom, let me quote one of the most influential philosophers of our day. This is a young woman who is incredibly gifted, had incredible talent, but was told to repress them or conceal them. You'll know who I'm talking about. When she broke free from this repression, she said or sung, "It's time to see what I can do, to test the limits and break through. No right, no wrong, no rules for me, I'm free. Let it go." Your knowing faces suggest that you know I'm talking about Elsa from Frozen, but that is the spirit of the day. Throw off the constraints. Throw off the constraints of what others tell you who you should do, or what you should do, or who you should be, what they think is right or wrong. I'm free. I am free to decide that. A few years ago, the BBC ran a Freedom Day where they were asking people, what does it look like to be free? And the common response from people was, we are free when we can do or be what we want without external constraints, so long as we don't harm others. So we're free when we can do or be what we want without external constraints, or as long as we don't harm other people. And that or something similar has become our definition of freedom. Now, to unpack this a little, philosophers will know more about this than me, I'm sure, but we've landed on what philosophers call negative freedom. So we've got freedom from. We've got freedom from constraints. Positive freedom would be, I have freedom for. I have freedom to go and do this. But because we've sort of done away with belief in God, there's no agreement about what that freedom for would be, what that worthy end would be. And so we're left with negative freedom, where everyone is just free to think as they do please. Freedom from external constraints. And this increased emphasis on freedom has so many good things about it. This increased caring about each individual, about how everyone should have some sort of freedom. It was key behind things like the abolition of the slave trade, and in fighting towards more freedoms for women or for minorities. There's so much good stuff about this. But I think there's a few issues with that definition as well. So I'm going to chat about them now and see how the Christian faith would sort of answer them under the headlines of freedom from and freedom for. So let's start with freedom from. And I want to ask the question, is freedom from all constraints really a good thing? And I think if you think about that just for a few minutes, we'll probably agree that actually no, freedom from all constraints isn't a good thing. Constraints actually enable our freedom. Just like Monica Geller says in Friends, rules are good. Rules control the fun. Just like in sport, in football, there are rules, there are constraints on you, right? You can't pick up the ball and hold it with your hands. You can't go in on a two-foot tackle on someone's shins. Those are constraints, but they actually enable your freedom to play. Your freedom to go and enjoy the beautiful game. In society, there are laws which stop your shop being broken into. Those are constraints, but they enable your freedom to run a business and provide for yourself. In nature, think of the example of a fish in the sea. The fish is most free when it obeys the constraints of being in water. A fish who is free to live on the land isn't going to have a great time. It's not really going to work out that well. It's good to stick to these constraints, and when we break them, it hurts us, but when we honour them, we're most free to live. You're probably on board with that so far, but what about moral constraints then? They seem to come in a different category. In terms of morality, who can tell me what is right or wrong? if there's no higher order, if there's no God, then everyone's free to just choose what they believe to be right and then be true to that. And it'd be wrong for me to tell you how to live, wouldn't it? Because that would be impinging on your freedom, and vice versa. That would be intolerant. But should there be moral constraints? Again, if we think about that just for a moment, I think we'd all agree that we do need some. Otherwise, it would be absolute chaos. People would use their power and their freedom to hurt other people. If I can do what I want, I could steal, insult, destroy, kill, and who can tell me I'm wrong? And on what basis? No one wants to live in that world. So we do have one restraint, right? One constraint, the harm principle. Back to that definition. We are free when we can do or be what we want without external constraints, so long as we don't harm others. Important rider in there, right? But I think that still leads to some difficulties, because who decides what harm is? Even talking about harm presupposes that there is a moral standard that you want to live up to. But what's that? If there's no God, who decides what harm is? And there's often a lot of debate. I think one example is one might say that a man is free to watch porn on his own, it's just for his own enjoyment, doesn't cause harm to anyone, no problem. Others would say that actually, no, it is harmful because watching porn can have a negative impact with his relationship with females, or damage any future relationship that he is in. And what about the women who were involved in the making of that? Was there any harm done to them? Another example is often we think, or perhaps we thought, that we can eat what we like, buy whatever we like in whatever form, drive, for example, fly as often as we like. My decision, my freedom to go and do those things, no problem. What's the harm? But more and more we realise the harm that those things can cause to our planet. And that's not just harmful to the environment, but also to us as people over the world begin more and more to suffer the consequences of that. And the interesting thing about that is often we didn't even think that was harmful because we didn't know what was going to happen. But then in the future, we don't know what's going to be harmful in the future. Who decides what harm is, and are we right? So a society where everyone just does as they see fit without any constraints would be chaos. But without any moral standard to live by, it's all subjective. I'm free to decide what harm is, and who can tell me I'm wrong? What if there's moral constraints which are actually good for us, which actually enable us to be free? Just like the fish has the constraint of being in water, which is good for it, and it enables freedom. Well, what does the Christian story say about this? I don't know what you're like when you get a new device, whether you meticulously look through the instruction manual, or you just go, I'll hope for the best. If we don't follow the instructions, often we don't get the best out of it because we don't know all the great stuff that it can do, or we can end up damaging it. A friend of mine a few years ago was driving from Oxford to Manchester, and it was a 4 a.m. start. He had to be in Manchester by 8 o'clock. So he rocked up to the office where he picked up one of the company cars, was like, right, that needs some fuel, go to the station, fill it up. He's a bit tired, gets back in the car won't start. What's happened? Well, he's got a diesel car and he's filled it with petrol. A life lesson if you drive. Don't do that. That doesn't work out too well. So the car wouldn't start. It cost hundreds of pounds to get it fixed. And it was his birthday. It was a bad day for him. But what was the issue? He didn't follow the instructions about the car. He damaged it because he didn't read or follow the instructions about how the car should function. Now look, the ones who made the car, or any device or invention, are the ones who know how best to get that. They're the best place to tell you how that thing is to work. Now look, I'm not expecting you necessarily to believe right now that there is a God, but imagine if there is. Imagine if there is a God who designed the universe. Imagine if there is a God who created human beings and that he is good. Would we not expect him to know what is best for us? The best way for us to live and to flourish and to be free. Because the claim of the Bible is that that is the case. That there is a good God who created us and he has given us moral constraints to live by, but they are for our good. They are the very best thing for us and actually even enable our freedom. On your tables, you've got some books. Please do grab one. There's one for each of you. You're very welcome to take it back home with you. It says on cover on the front. Please turn to page 50. What this is, it's one of the books from the Bible. It's called the Gospel of John. It's an eyewitness record of Jesus' life. So if you turn to page 50, down right at the bottom in the last paragraph, you'll see the little number 31. Let me just read from there. It's Jesus speaking. To the Jews who had believed him, Jesus said, "If you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Jesus makes a link here between holding to his teaching and the truth setting us free. Could it be that following Jesus' teachings actually set us free? Many of us don't think that, do we? We think that Christianity, we think that religion is constraining, restrictive, and yet Jesus says that it sets us free. Let me give you a couple of examples of some of the moral constraints or commands, as it were, that Jesus gives us or that God gives us in the Bible, and actually try to show that actually they are freeing. So one example is forgiveness. There is a command in the Bible that we are to forgive one another. That is a constraint, because often the most natural option is to be bitter, or to try and get revenge, or to hold a grudge, or to cancel them. But imagine if instead of cancel culture we had forgiveness culture. It doesn't roll off the tongue in quite the same way, I admit. To forgive is a moral command I'm to follow, but yet it is good for me. Nelson Mandela, famously, on his release from prison, said, "As I walked out the door toward my freedom, I knew that if I did not leave all the anger, hatred and bitterness behind, that I would still be in prison." Forgiveness sets us free from the prison of our own bitterness. There's one example. Another one, let's see what you make of this one. The Bible says, do not get drunk. What a constraint. But what happens when you are drunk? You're not in control. You're not free to do what you like, because you are under the influence of something else. Getting drunk, as many of us know, can lead us to doing things that we regret. Whereas when I'm not drunk, which God says is for our good, it makes me free to make wise decisions. It makes me free to not send a text that I'm going to regret. It makes me free to not go home with somebody that it's not a good idea to. It makes me free to actually think carefully about how I'm going to get home and be safe when I do that. It makes me free not to spend loads of my money, or to have a hangover the next morning, or to have that feeling of regret. When I'm drunk, I'm free to make more rational decisions, and even to please God in the way that I live. There's a few examples, but Christianity gives us good restraints to live by, which are freeing. So, where are we? We've looked at freedom from, and I've talked about that freedom from constraint isn't necessarily a good thing, and that having the right constraints can enable our freedom. Let's move on then to freedom for. What is our freedom for? And are we actually free? We're free to do what we like, but does that work? Are we? Because what happens when the desires conflict? Sports people understand this. I want to eat the chocolate cake or in front of me, and I want to eat whatever I want when I want. But I also want to be an elite athlete. The two of them can't realistically go together. So what am I going to do when these desires conflict? I'm going to give up the freedom to eat what I want in order to attain the greater freedom of being the best athlete that I can be, and all that comes with that. Students, I imagine you understand this. I remember sitting in my room at Sherwood Hall one night, writing an essay, or trying to, which was due the next day, and my friends walked past on their way to a night out, and they said, "Come on, leave your essay, come with me." My desires are conflicting here. So what am I going to do? Am I going to give up the freedom to go on a night out with my friends, which is what I want to do, in order for the greater freedom to get this essay done, to get a better grade in my degree, and to get a better job, etc., and all the freedoms that might come with that. I didn't choose that night. I went out and then came home and did my essay at 4 a.m. the next morning. Would not recommend. But hopefully from that we can see that freedom isn't that simple. There are constraints on us, but we've got to choose which ones to adhere to, which freedoms we're going to lose and sacrifice for a greater freedom. But as you push that further, you might say, yeah, but I'm still the one who's choosing which constraints I'm going to honour. I'm still choosing which freedom I'm going to put over other freedoms. Sure, but I guess we're still living under the constraints which are defined for us. We still have to submit to the realities of that world. We're not this world. We're not free to go against that. But also, am I really free as I sacrifice some freedoms for one particular thing? Because that one particular thing becomes the thing that I am living for. So if I want to get loads of money, I would give up many freedoms to do well in my degree, to get a good job, to work really hard in order to get paid enough, whatever enough is. That becomes the thing that I live for. But as we do that, are we really free? Or does that thing become our master who makes demands on our lives and our time? A guy called David Foster Wallace, who is not a Christian, he is a novelist, and he was giving a speech before a graduation ceremony. And he describes what I just mentioned in the language of worship, whereby the thing that you serve and that you live for and you sacrifice stuff for, that becomes the thing that you worship, in the sense you give your life to it. Listen to what he says. In the day-to-day trenches of adult life, there is actually no such thing as atheism. There is no such thing as not worshipping. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship. So he's saying, like, something is going to become the controlling factor of your life. Or in the words of a Bob Dylan song, you're going to have to serve somebody. We're all going to end up serving somebody or something because, as Wallace says, everybody worships. And then he goes on to say, look, the reason for worshipping, or the benefit of worshipping some kind of spiritual being, is because, quote, that pretty much anything else you worship will eat you alive. He says, if you worship money and things, if they are where you tap real meaning in life, then you will never have enough. You'll never feel you have enough. He says, if you worship your body and beauty and sexual allure, you will always feel ugly. And when time and age start showing, you will die a million deaths before they finally grieve you. Worship power, you'll end up feeling weak and afraid, and you will need ever more power over others to numb you to your own fear. Worship your intellect, being seen as smart, and you will end up feeling stupid or fraud, always on the verge of being found out. I wonder what that thing might be for you. Wallace says that it's often unconscious, but what is the thing which you could end up worshipping? That fixed thing in your, that controlling factor in your life which you sacrifice many other things for? Is it wealth? Is it academic success, sporting success, your body image, power, intellect, popularity, comfort, pleasure? And can I ask, how is it working out? Is it something which is setting you free, or is it something which enslaves you? A way I sometimes thought about it is, you might be free to do something, but are you free not to do it? For me, some years back, exercising, being fit, healthy, having an athletic figure was something which became that controlling factor in my life, I guess. And it had many rules, things that I had to follow in order to try and achieve that. And you know what? I thought, I love to run. I am free. I am free to run every day. Great. But I started to realise that I wasn't free to not run every day. It became something that I had to do. It became a controlling factor in my life. And as Wallace says, it eats you alive. Yes, we're free to follow our dreams, but are we free not to do it? How easy is it just to walk away? We're all going to end up living for something which constrains us. We give up lesser freedoms for some greater freedom. But who or what is it that we're going to serve? Can it be someone or something which actually is liberating and sets us free? Back in those books, if you'd like to turn just back to page 52, just the page after we were in earlier, it's just one line, verse 36. Jesus says, if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. Jesus promises that knowing him, even with the constraints he gives us, means freedom. How can we be sure about that? Why should I trust him over anything else in the world? Well, Jesus also said, in a different book of the Bible, in another eyewitness account of his life, he said, for even the Son of Man, that's Jesus, did not come to be served, but to serve. and to give his life as a ransom for many. What kind of a master is Jesus? What kind of a person is he to worship? He's one who comes to serve. He's one who gives himself. He sacrificed his own freedom when he was literally nailed to a cross so he couldn't move. Why? To pay the price for all of the ways in which we have overstepped his moral constraints or worshipped anything other than him. And he does it because he loves you. Anything else that you live for will demand that you reach a certain standard, and it will give you rules and commands that you have to follow, striving always to be better. And yet still, but are you ever going to make it? Is it ever going to be good enough? Whereas with Jesus, it says, yes, I have moral commands for you to follow, but they are not prerequisites for you to being loved by me. They are not the entry point. Actually, no, come as you are and let me love you. And in the context of you being my deeply loved child, we'll work out what it means to live life in its fullest. If you're living for something like career and your body, what happens if you fail? It will crucify you inside with self-loathing. But Jesus was crucified for you. What else will do that for you? Give up their life for you. Jesus forgives you when you fail. And Jesus is there to bring us into a relationship with God, which is where we can find true freedom. Freedom to be what we are designed to be, which is in a relationship with God. Freedom to love him and to love others. Let me just give you an example of what this looks like, or could look like. Is there something which many of us give up many, many freedoms for, many constraints on our lives, and yet sets us free? What about love? The most constraining liberation, or the most liberating constraint. When you love someone, you give up all sorts of freedoms for them. You make all sorts of sacrifices for them. It is very constraining. And yet, as the song goes, only love can set you free. The deeper you get with someone, the more constraining, but yet the most liberating. Love is incredibly liberating. It means you don't have to face the world alone. It means you can be secure in yourself. It means you can have someone with you who will help you achieve many of your goals in life. The deeper you go with Jesus, in one sense, yes, there may well be more constraints to how you were living before, but you will find deeper and deeper freedom. And you know what happens in a love relationship? You start to want to please them. You want to do things which please them. The deeper you go with Jesus, the more you realise just how much he loves you. The more you grow to love him, and you go, yeah, I want to do the things which you asked me to do because I love you. And I believe that they are the best thing. If the Son sets you free, you'll be free indeed. Jesus can set us free from the need to prove ourselves, from the need to gain approval, from insecurities about ourselves and the future, from all sorts of anxieties. He can free us from the guilt and the shame which we so often feel. He can free us even from the fear of death. And he can give us freedom to love God, which is what we're made for, freedom to love one another and to love life and to flourish as we live as we are designed to do. That's me done for now. Have a couple of minutes around your tables. Just have a chat. What do you think of that? What questions have you got? And please do feel free to go onto Slido, type in that code, and in a couple of minutes' time, we'll jump up and see how many questions that we can get through.